You might be aware that I've been trying to study Japanese for a couple of years now. I've been more consistent at different times throughout my life, and recently life kind of just happened and I lost touch with learning Japanese, and I'm so sad about it. I want to build up this habit again. Especially with school starting right now, I want to be able to still learn the things that I'm interested in my personal life, learn something in my free time that isn't grades based. And so perhaps you are starting to learn Japanese right now, feel like you're in a similar situation like me trying to get back into it, or are just interested in building a study habit for something you want to learn about in your free time and self-study. You may be interested in what I'm going to be talking about today. In terms of getting back into studying Japanese again, I'm going to go over my approaches, how I'm curating resources, and also how to build a study habit with this, or at least how I'm trying to be more consistent with it. If you're interested in hearing more, grab some water or tea, and let's get into it. First of all, right, we want to get some orientation on where we stand with the subject. And obviously when you're starting out, it's going to be a lot simpler, but I've always found it so overwhelming to get back into a subject because there were so many different points of connection to the subject where I've kind of stopped nurturing that resource or that skill specifically. So the first thing for me would be to determine when I stopped studying or being consistent and where that left me within my resources. For this, you kind of need a list of all of the resources you've been using. For me, it really helps that I've been tracking all of the resources I've been using in this Notion study page for learning Japanese. So it's pretty easy for me to go back and see where I left off. But that would kind of be the first step. So determining what chapters you're at in your textbooks, or like which levels you're at in the apps. Perhaps also like what was the last episode you watched in the series that you were studying. I think going back through all of this is kind of a tedious step, but so valuable because it can also highlight like maybe where you got stuck, maybe what topic you were studying that was really difficult that made you struggle and perhaps even take a step back from studying. That knowledge can definitely empower you moving forward on navigating this topic, perhaps with a different approach, so that ultimately we won't get stuck up on it again. Now we have all of this awareness. So what would be the next step? Good question, because it is time to curate a new version of my study methods. So let's talk about my new approach when it comes to curating my study schedule to learn Japanese this time around. For me, this is two main points. The first one being having more fun with the topics I'm studying, and also definitely connecting to topics I'm already interested and passionate about. Making links between different subjects is really interesting to me in general. So as an example, since I'm already interested in history and politics, learning more about Japanese history and politics, also about geography, can be a great way for me to get back into it and also to continue exploring those topics while I'm learning the new language, because I'm familiar with the topics and also interested in them. So it can kind of like help me stay interested in learning the language and feel familiar with something when there's so much I could be studying about. Perhaps using them as orientation for where I would like to, or what I would like to build my curriculum around. Another example of this having fun point is also just studying in methods that feel good to me. This time around, I want to be reading more and also giving myself some more challenging reading tasks, because I think in my previous approaches, I've kind of remained at the same level with reading because I didn't dare to start any book or longer stories. So that's where I'm going. And that goes over into my second part, and that is looking at my study endeavors and study methods or the different resources I'm using as projects. Approaching my studying as projects allows me to redefine the categories of a subject a bit more subjectively. So being able to create my own little journeys within language learning. For example, if I want to read a certain book, defining the process of perhaps like going through it several times with different study methods and having an end goal, maybe even a date for that end goal of being able to comprehend the book and write an essay on it. That whole thing is a unique process that you can define as your own project. And so I want to approach my studying Japanese a bit more with this project mindset. As I mentioned earlier, I have this intentionality to learn more through what my interests are. And so I'm excited to talk about this one resource that has been helping me getting back into learning Japanese. And it's this kanji learning app called Mochi Mochi. This is a joyful experience of learning kanji and vocabulary in the form of an app that can help you learn up to 1,000 kanji and vocabulary in a month. And so what I really appreciate is the diversity of content that it teaches you, ranging from vocabulary for the JLPT exams, which is super relevant to a lot of people who are studying Japanese, from levels N5 to N2, as well as specialized courses for different needs. And it teaches you this content using lively flashcards with illustrations and also audio playbacks. One of my favorite aspects about Mochi Mochi is actually in connection to the courses. It's the fact that they are broken down into smaller topics, and these have been super easy to implement as 15-minute sessions on a daily basis. In this course, N5 Kanji and Vocab, I did the office stationery one and the My Town one, my favorites. So these are all such relevant topics to life, but I can just literally study which ones I feel like studying in the moment, which is so great. It's so great. So that's cool. But here is what makes Mochi Mochi more powerful, and that is that it analyzes your golden time by using a special algorithm, defining the best time for you to review what you've learned so far. You might be aware of the forgetting curve. It basically exemplifies how what we learn can be retained better when we revise it with spaced repetition at the right time. So with Mochi Mochi, you will be notified of your golden time to help you memorize effectively in this personalized learning process. For me personally, it really helps to know my progress and stay aware of my progress, and therefore I think it's super cool that in Mochi Mochi you can get an overview of exactly how many words you've learned so far and their memorization level from 1 to 5. So that's cool. If you're interested in trying out this resource yourself, you can download the app in the App Store or also the Google Play Store. Just search Mochi Mochi and then you can select this app called Mochi Mochi Learn Kanji. Let's talk about more resources that I'm planning to use this time around. To touch back on the projects, actually, I guess you could see my resources as 4 different projects, but I haven't defined the projects themselves yet. I just know what resources I want to link to the projects. So one would be studying kanji and vocabulary with an app, which would be Mochi Mochi. Then the next resource I want to be focusing on is having a textbook, mainly for grammar, and being intentional with how I go through the textbook. So that is another resource. The next 2 resources are going to be one book, probably a children's book, and then one movie. I have so many series that I want to watch that are Japanese, but the series right now have been a bit overwhelming. So I want to do a project with a movie where I study the movie and set some goals related to that. So yeah, I'm super excited to pick the movie and pick the book. I think those, again, I want to align with my current interests already. So that is an overview of the composition of my resources. And compared to the past, y'all, it's kind of more simple and I like that a lot. So let's see how it goes. And then I also wanted to mention that within the project, I can be focusing on different types of skills. So even, for example, when I am working on the book and going through the book, I can also add in practices of writing and listening. You know, maybe there's an audiobook. So that is where I pull in the different skills and aspects of a language, just in the framework of a project. All right, so far we know where we stand and have gained awareness about where we stopped. We have defined a new approach and mindset. We have curated resources. And now, let's talk about building this habit. I've actually done an entire video about what kind of mindset can help you stay connected to your language learning journey. And I've kept all of those things in mind, and still, like, it's so difficult to stay consistent with something if it's not a part of your life. So for me personally, building this habit back up has been a process of making learning Japanese a part of my life again. And seriously, like, an app like Machi it sounds like it wouldn't be as helpful as it was for me personally. But really starting small and having those 15-minute sessions, as I mentioned earlier, has been so manageable. And I think that would be my first piece of advice, like, in terms of building the habits. It can be so tempting, especially in the beginning, you know, like when we get this boost of motivation to set up hours of studying and plan for hours of studying. But historically, I haven't been personally able to rely on this motivation. And therefore, seriously, let's all start small and manageable and build from there. I think one of the most important skills actually when building habits is a lot of awareness too, and the ability to adapt your habits as well. So it's this weird paradox of, you know, creating structures and routines, but also being able to be open to changing them and allowing them to evolve and be flexible at the same time. This is a gradual process, right? And most importantly is that we stay in touch with our target language, with the subject that we want to study. And so let's focus on a long-term perspective and start smaller. So I'm personally starting with the 15-minute sessions and solely with the app, and then I'm going to be focusing on building those projects out with the textbook, the book, and the movie. The best, of course, is if you're using a calendar and actually tracking most of what you're doing throughout the day. It's going to be pretty easy to find the spots and your routines where you can stack this habit into. But if you don't do that, then I've recommended this several times in the past to just write out your day, reflect a bit on what are your actual routines and habits, even if they aren't intentional, you know, like brushing your teeth, or perhaps every morning you just like get a breath of fresh air on your balcony, and maybe that's when you want to study for like 10 minutes, you know? To sum up the building a study habit part, for me, it's really making this a part of my life again, making it real. So after determining where in my day I want to build this habit at and staying consistent with that, it's about scheduling in that time as well and making sure that I can get to that time. So for example, if I'm at school and I want to be studying Japanese at a certain time, am I going to be studying it there or am I going to be studying it here? You know, just like making it realistic and making it a part of my schedule. That also means prioritizing it just as much as other commitments that you may have.